Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be starting a new series. It's going to be on AP Computer Science A, or APCSA in short, and this is going to be basically the AP curriculum series about the AP Computer Science, which is basically based on Java, right? And the AP test is actually coming up soon as well, and I probably should have started this earlier, but anyways, this is hopefully going to be a good review and a good overview. If you're taking it next year or just interested in APCS, this is going to be a good series for you. And so before we get started, remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and obviously share the video, and make sure to comment in the comment section below if you have any good ideas or if you want to see something in this series that you're truly confused about or interested in. Anyways, so let's get started with the video. Alright, so first let me go over an APCS overview. So obviously, as I said before, this is a class based on the language Java, and it's about computer science, right? So obviously it's going to be helpful if you have some prior Java experience, but if not, I'll try to explain as best as possible, and also we'll go over code examples and we'll do a lot of practice, because as with every class, most important thing is practice. So all the units here are primitive types, which we'll go over today, and it's not too bad, right? And then there's using objects, Boolean expressions, iterations, writing classes, array-list, arrays, 2D arrays, and inheritance recursion. Now, if you don't know what that is, well, obviously it's gonna be a little bit complicated, but I'll try to explain them as best as possible. And basically, we're just gonna go over all these units, and we're gonna do a lot of practice, because the APCS, you're going to want to do a lot of practice, and you're going to want to be able to do it on the multiple choice and the FRQ. And a lot of people struggle with FRQs, which is because that's basically based on coding, and it's about understanding the question. And so we'll go over those. And today, since we're going to go over primitive types, it's going to be very basic stuff, right? And I'll go over some stuff that might not be on the test, but does sometimes appear, like binary numbers, octal numbers, hexadecimal numbers. It does appear sometimes, but not all the time. So let's get to that, right? Let's go to primitive types. Alright, so Java has 8 primitive types. So you might be thinking, if you see this list, so these are actually the 8 primitive types, right? This is your list. Now, if you are already been doing Java, you might be thinking, where's string, right? Well, string isn't a primitive type, and that's something that a lot of people miss. So string is not a primitive, right? It's not primitive. So I'm just going to write not primitive. And string is in fact actually an object, right? And we'll learn about objects later. If you don't know them, don't worry about them, right? We'll learn about them later. But a string is indeed not primitive. So just remember that. Okay, so let's get started. What are these primitive types mean? And I'll also show code examples after this, so we'll get an understanding of this. So I've grouped them in such a way so we can talk about it this way. So byte, short, int, and long. Well, byte and short, they're not really tested as much, right? But they're basically just they hold integers, right? But they don't hold, so they have like a maximum range of integers they can hold. And for example, byte can hold all integers between -128 and 127. So till 127, or let me do it this way. So till 127, and that's like the range of bytes, what byte can hold. Short is like a little bit more than that. It's like -2 to the 15th, 2 to the 15th minus 1, and this doesn't really matter like what they can hold. You just need to know that they're all holding integers, right? That's like the main idea. Integer, it holds a little bit more size, but integer is actually the most commonly used, right? I really doubt you're going to use byte and short on the AP test, but in case it does pop up, you know what it is. And integer is 2 to 31. You're going to use integer probably the most. Long might be there, but long is like the largest, so it holds the most amount of numbers, which is -2 to the 63, I believe, and 2 to the 63 minus 1. And these numbers aren't too important. Like, there's a low chance you're going to get asked like what the range of an integer is, but just good to know in case you do, right? You might just get a free point there, right? Just by knowing the information. And also, I'll just talk about the size, like how much size each, or how much basically how much size each variable takes, and it's not important as well. It's like very rarely tested, but in case it does show up, just remember byte is 1 byte. Obviously, we're going to talk about size in bytes. Obviously, a byte is a byte, right? I know, right? Very impressive. Short is 2 bytes, and integer, I believe, is 4 byte, and long is 8. So it's just in factors of 2, essentially. You could think about, or yeah, basically 2 to the first, 2 to the second, 2 to the third, that kind of. So these are all, they hold all whole integers, and if you remember from math, it's just all basic numbers, -1, -2, that kind of stuff, but not decimals, that stuff, right? dot dot dot, right? That kind of stuff. So they all hold integers. I'm just gonna write that integers, and actually int obviously signifies integer, right? Int. Okay, and then next to grouping, let's choose green, I guess. These two, they hold decimal numbers. So float, for example, is actually smaller than double, right? Just like integer, how there's int and long. Float is another way to hold decimals, and float is a little bit unique in the sense, and I can obviously write the ranges like negative 3.4 times 10 to the 28, or 38 actually, until 3.4 times 10 to 38, something like that. And it's like 4 bytes, right? It's 4 bytes, just like how integer is 4 bytes. And double, which is mostly used, float is like rarely used ever. Like I haven't seen anything on AP tests using float, just in case, you know. And then double is like negative 1.8 times 10 to the 308. Yeah, it's a pretty large number. And then again, same the positive way as well. So they both hold positive and negatives, both int and bytes. So there's like int and double. So it's not like one has negative and the other one doesn't. So you don't need to remember that. So 8 bytes, and they all hold decimal numbers, right? These both hold like 0.1, negative 0.2, and like all that kind of stuff. Like, can I draw a negative? Okay, let me rewrite that. So they all hold decimals, right? It's like 0.1, negative 0.2, that kind of stuff. And the thing about float is when you're gonna write it in Java, you're gonna want to have an f after it, or otherwise it'll complain. So you'll write like 0.1 f to make it a float, something like that. That's why float's like rarely used. It's not too important to know, but just know that these are primitive types, right? So just remember f. And sometimes they do actually trick you. So they might just be like, which one of these is actually right, and like it might be a double, and double is the answer, but don't put f because that converts it to a float. So just remember that. And then there's char, and char is basically short for characters. So it is anything like okay, I'm just gonna write it's not like a number, right? But it basically has ASCII code, or like a number signifying what the character value is in integer. But anyways, what it basically holds is like characters like this, and it's single quotation. So like it holds one character B, or it could even hold a dot, right? It could hold not two quotes. It could even hold an empty space, something like that, right? And then there's also other stuff like /n, which, if you know, is a new line, like when you print, and we'll talk about that as well. And this is, I believe, 2 bytes actually. This is 2 bytes, and it just holds characters essentially. So I'm just gonna put that like that. These basically just hold character. Now Boolean, which is actually used in a lot of let's choose a different color like blue. Okay, this is actually used a lot of times in algorithm kind of questions a lot of times, because Boolean is very interesting in the sense that it's true and false. It's just 2 values, true and false, right? And this 1 byte, but it's going to be used a lot, and it's definitely tested a lot on the AP test, especially those annoying like reading questions where you have to like gives you a line. It gives you like a piece of code, and you have to basically find out what it's saying and what's going to output. And a lot of times they use Boolean just to trick people. So Boolean is definitely important as well. So these are just the primitive types in Java. Obviously, you're going to use them, and it's very important to know because almost every program has primitive types, and everything tested on the AP test will definitely have primitive types, and you will need to know them. Like as I said, these two for integers are important. Double is important. Basically, these three are important. Double for decimals, char for characters, Boolean for true and false. Float's not too important. Byte and short are rarely ever tested. I don't think I've ever seen it. But these are just the primitive types. So now let's go to a code editor and just start coding, and let's see basically how we can let's do some addition, some subtraction, basic math stuff, and let's print to the console and just let's test out these primitive types, right? So let's get to that. Alright, so let's start with primitive types. And so here I basically just have a normal Java class. Let me delete this part, right? So I basically have a normal Java class, so class main, and I'm using Replit here because I'm too lazy to open text editor, but anyways, Replit is really easy and quick, so just go with this one for now. And I think this is actually a good idea because it doesn't have too much autocomplete, so which also helps on the AP test. And so advice that I have is when you're coding for the AP test, practicing for that, try not to have autocomplete. Don't use like a IDE because it gives you autocomplete, right? And for, let's say you're in person and you're testing, right, and you basically have to write the code by hand, right? and you don't want to have like the idea of just autocomplete, because you're just relying on that, and that just might mess up your coding when you're writing it up or even typing it up, because you're not getting autocomplete on the test, right? That would just to completely diminish the purpose of the test altogether. But anyways, let's talk about primitive types. So what I really have is a class, right, a Java class, and then a main method. And whenever you run a Java program, it always calls this main method, and this is like the signature for that. It's public static void main string array of args, and we'll talk about what this all means, right? The array and static and the methods. We'll talk about that. That's actually the next unit, but the first, I don't know why the first unit is actually primitive types. It should be methods, but anyways, primitive types, right? Basic stuff. So basic like information. So let's talk about, I guess let's talk about byte, because this is the most relevant. Anyways, byte, let's say byte, and when you declare variables, you have the type first, which is byte here, and then you have the name. So let me just say my byte, for example, right? My byte, and then I can set a value, which is equal sign, and let's say it's 2, right? For example, just 2. And when you're gonna print, it's called system.out.println, and it's pretty much gonna get ingrained in your head. So print line, it basically prints it, and then the cursor, whenever you see the cursor, it's gonna go to the next line. If I do print, it'll stay on the same line, and I'll show both though to see the difference. So let's say we run this. Hopefully Replit does not take forever.
A few moments later.
Okay, so Replit was sort of slow, and anyways, you see I did system.out.print my byte, and you see that it printed the number 2, and it also didn't go to the next line. Now if I were to change this to ln, right, print line, which means, as I said, it prints on the line and then it goes to the next line, then hopefully Replit doesn't take forever. You'll see that it'll print 2 and then it'll go to the next line. You see that? That's on the next line. Cool stuff. And let's do short. Let me just call this, actually what I'm going to do is keep byte, and I'll do short, and let's say my short, and let's do a number. Let's say we do like a number out of the range. Let's see what it, oh, actually the number is really, no, my short, we're not doing a number 2 to the 15. In fact, let's test that with byte here. So let me delete this. So since we know byte goes up to 128, just for fun purpose, let's do 129. Let's see if we get an error or some kind of like conversion error, something like that, right? Because we know byte. Yep. So as you see, we got some kind of error because that's the range of byte. Anyways, let's do short. So short, again, I'm going to do variable type short, and then I'm going to get my variable name, which is my short. Now let's just do 5, and I'm also going to do an integer because we're just going to print all of it at the same time, because I think you get the idea. So integer, my int, let's do like 99 or negative. Let's do a negative number because we haven't done one. So negative 23, and let's say long, my long, let's do 30, and just a kind of like a thought here. So you see my variable names, how I have lowercase and then every other word is like uppercase, right? Like my and then byte. This is Camel Case, and that's actually sort of recommended by AP Computer Science A, and you kind of want to write your variables in this way. So let's say first word, and then second, and then third. So every word after the first word is uppercase. The first letter is uppercase, and that's just a good way to read the code, and basically it's just stylistic purpose, but really that's what they want to see. So let's say we want to print all of these out on the same line, my short, my int, my long. So again, system.out.print, I'm going to do line because I want to go to the next line, and what we're going to do is we're going to separate them. So what we're going to do is we're going to print my short, then we're going to do a plus, and add us empty space. And what this is just giving a space between the console. So it's basically, this is called string concatenation, but we're going to talk about later. Just think of it as adding these elements together. And so basically I'm taking a number, then I'm adding an empty space, and then I'm going to put my int here, so it's just going to add it to the line that's already there. And then again, I'm going to do that again, give another empty space, and print my long. And what we're going to see is it's going to print 4, negative 23, and 30 on the same line. And then it's going to put the cursor on the next line because of print line. And the reason I'm emphasizing print line is because a lot of problems or a lot of multiple choice questions, they have print and print line on different lines, and it can confuse someone when they like basically read through it and see, oh, how is this happening? Well, you're going to make sure that you can distinguish between print line and print, right? Alright, so next let's do something interesting. Let's do I guess let's do double and float, right? So again, float, my float, right? Not the kind in the river, but like my float, right? Again, here you're gonna want to do f to signify that it's a float. And then double, my double is going to be, let's say 1.23, something like that. I just put a random number. And we're going to do the exact same thing that we did with my short, my int, and we're going to do that again with my float and my double. It's just going to work, right? It's just going to work for all primitive types that we do. Okay, I don't need another one. So let's just print that. So we should see 0.2, which is a float, 1.239843. And next, after this thing runs, because it's going to take for, oh, okay, what did we print? Okay, there we go. So that was our third line. And just to show you, if you don't put the f, right, you should get an error. And so basically it will say like it's not a float. You need to make sure that you make it a float, and it's not sure if it's a double or not. So you want to put f there to make it a float. Let's do char and boolean, because those are like the last two that we have. So char, again, I'm going to say my char, and it's going to be single quotes, right? It's just like how I was explaining in the the visual. So let's just say a, right? And then let's say I have a boolean, and I'm going to say my boolean. So remember, only true and false. I can't give like 890, or I can't give like something like W3, something like that. I can't do that, right? Because it's only true or false. Let's just give true, right? And let's print this out. Print line again, just making sure it goes to the next line, cursor. Oops, and then my char plus space my boolean. So just basic stuff, right? It's going to be important later on, but just basic, just to recap and like recall if you already have been doing Java. But if you haven't, just it's probably new for you. So you see that you got my char, which is a, and then my the boolean, which is true. So that was essentially all the primitive types for the first unit that we really needed to know. Next unit, we're going to talk about like objects, classes, and it's going to get a little bit more complicated. I'm going to start explaining what some of these things are and how the structure of the code works. But anyways, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comment section below if you think I missed anything, or if you want to see something else in the series about like primitive types, for example, or if you're just confused about the primitive types or some part of the video, let me know in the comment section below. I'll respond to you as soon as possible. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you soon.